Welcome to Brand Me. I'm Preston Konrad, and on this show, we'll talk all things branding, from launching a product line to owning your side hustle. We'll talk to the movers, the shakers, the thought leaders. What do you say we finally stop focusing on brands X, Y, and Z and focus on Brand Me? Let's start the show. You've heard me talk about my brand, Preston Konrad Home, and if you've ever wanted to grab something from my luxury home fragrance collection, today is your day. I want to hook you guys up with 10% off of any single item on PrestonKonradHome.com. That's one of our luxury candles or our new hand wash. Use the code BRANDME. That's PrestonKonradHome.com. Offer code BRANDME. Hey, everybody. On today's show, we are discussing taking the leap. I'm sitting down with Charlee Atkins. She's the creator of La Sweat TV, which is an online fitness community. And Charlee left her job as one of the original master instructors at SoulCycle after 7 years of being an employee to start her own brand. And her discussion into taking that leap is so inspiring, and there's some really great information here. So buckle up, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy this conversation with Charlee Atkins. Hi, Charlee Atkins.
Hello, Preston.
I'm so happy to have you here. I feel like I should know you, like as a human and friend, but I came across you during COVID, I think, probably, if not right before.
Right before, like we met in January of 2020 at Amazon very briefly.
Yep.
I think we happened to be working on the same day, and it was like a crossover. So
how crazy is that Amazon setup?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it makes the Today Show look like regional, local news. It's wild.
Inspiring from, which I'm sure we'll talk about, at-home workout filming studios. It was inspiring to see a very large studio like that and try to reproduce it in COVID from your home.
You did a great job. It's funny, like certain people during the new Instagram every 2 week shakeup, you know how like your Instagram looks completely different every time. Your little bubble is always, when you're active, is like always to the front of my thing. So I feel like I'm up to speed. It's doing its work. I'm up to speed with everything going on. But for those who have people who don't know you, this episode is kind of about taking a leap. And in thinking about who I wanted to be the guest for this episode, you were the perfect person. You spent many years, I want to say upwards of 7 years in-house with SoulCycle. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, 7.5 years.
Yeah. Talk to me a bit about, because I'm a big SoulCycle fan. I'm sure you were when you were there. I used my bike this morning. Less of a workout, more of just the mental thing of what that specific format does for me. But when I think of someone like you who was in a setup like you were, on the top of the podium, figuratively and literally, how did you decide it was time to leave your job? What was that thing like? I mean, I can imagine.
So my time at SoulCycle, I am incredibly grateful for. I learned so much. And to talk about branding, two of the, women branding rock stars of the world are Julie Rice and Elizabeth Cutler, who I thankfully can still call my mentors to this day. I learned so much from SoulCycle. As far as taking the leap and deciding when it was time to go, I remember in my exit post, whenever I was announcing my retirement from SoulCycle, when I was unclipping for the last time, I was really trying to figure out a way to write, how do you express 7.5 years? And, most people didn't understand moving on. Why would you move from something that's so great? And my fiance actually helped me curate my post. And it just started out with, 7.5 years anywhere is a long time. And it's a very long time to be somewhere. And as far as growth and career and what have you, SoulCycle was the first real career that I had. And if I wasn't progressing as a human and as a career and a businesswoman, to be in the same place for that long, I was doing myself a disservice. So I absolutely needed to take the leap. And to be honest, I was probably there 3 years too long.
It's so funny you say that, because I look at 7 years. It's interesting. I see it two ways. A lot of people that are somewhere more than 3 years, 4 years, they're probably pretty comfortable. They may stay there 10 to 15 years. I was at Ralph Lauren 15. I know people there that were for 30, right? Like I thought I was going to be a lifer. Or you see people that 7 years, like maybe like you, is really stretching the end of the rubber band, pulling it almost a little too tight. How did you last for so long while having that entrepreneurial thing, because there's a comfort in 7 years and a big company like SoulCycle. I don't know if they were owned by Related at the time of that, but what was that like?
It's a kind of a tough question. Or it's actually not that tough. My time at SoulCycle was brilliant. I mean, I really did as much as I could. Towards the end, whenever I was ready to leave, I felt that I was at that glass ceiling where, I was like banging at the top saying, is there more? Is there more? And that's really what allowed me to leave was there was nothing else I could do. I had done everything that I could at that company. I was as far as you could go as instructors. I had sold out classes. I had taught live DJ rides. I had been in pretty much every single campaign.
I remember seeing you in all the picture. I mean, you were like star child of the brand, which is, I guess is one of those things. It's like, you could see people saying, God, I can't believe at that pinnacle why you would ever leave a job, but you just feel it.
Yeah, I felt it. And what was the reason that I was able to stay for 7.5 years was that one of the reasons I loved working for the company was that they really did take care of their employees. Yeah. And especially Julie and Elizabeth, they were fantastic. And like I said, I still am in touch with them. I still get to work with them in small pieces. And they're just such great people. They're really good at taking care of people and making somebody want to be a part of something. And that was why it was tough to be a part or to eventually be like, oh my gosh, I'm leaving SoulCycle, was because for so long you're a part of something that's so good and so comfortable. Yep. It's like, it really takes a certain type of personality to leave. And that's kind of what I pride my new brand on, Le Sweat, is that personality. So
I was going to ask you, okay, so before we get into Le Sweat, which is so inspiring to me, what you're building, what you've built, what you've done during this wild pandemic. When I left Ralph Lauren, I had a hard time physically getting dressed in the morning because my job for 15 years was to wear a certain costume and wear a skin of someone else's brand. The SoulCycle brand and the people that come out of it all have a very similar way of communicating or way of speaking. Or did you feel that had become part of you, or were you able to shake that pretty quickly when it was time to build Charlee brand? How was that like shedding process?
I mean, the shedding took years. Right. I created Le Sweat 3 years before I left. That's what I'm saying. I should have left 3 years. I should have left 3 years before 7.5. I started building Le Sweat 3 years before I left. So I was still working at SoulCycle, and SoulCycle created a space where they wanted you to be creative. Yep. And I think that when you work for these companies, if they don't allow you to be who you are, in this case, off the bike, then it's really hard to love showing up for work, right? Yeah. It's really hard to want to put on the uniform and, be the cheerleader for the company unless you feel like you're getting to benefit out of it. And SoulCycle actually allowed me to create Le Sweat in the sense that I told them that I really wanted to create this off the bike component. And, they were like, okay, go do it. And I was a part of the opening of the Soul Annex, which was this incubator platform that SoulCycle tried to create, where there were off the bike modalities. And I was kind of one of the head instructors for that. And that was because they really did want their instructors to be happy. Yeah. But yes, the shedding took quite some time. The hardest part of leaving was the riders, the community. They really make you want to stay. But over time, we worship our instructors in many different ways, just from what they do for us physically, but they're almost like spiritual leaders for us after a certain amount of time. So I imagine that was a hard disconnect for certain people and for you. So I've never ever in my life have taken breakups well. Like I'm just not a good person with breakups. I mean, like, I just was not a good person when it came to breakups. Which is why I'm so happy to be locked and loaded with the guy that I am with now, my future husband. But I was really worried about leaving SoulCycle because I likened it to breaking up, to getting out of a relationship. But for the first time in my life, when I walked away from SoulCycle, I really just breathed this sigh of relief where I was like, and that exhale and that release was what created a space for me to be able to leave Le Sweat. And I still had some issues in the sense that, it was like this ex-boyfriend type of deal where
Yeah.
I was, kind of trying to figure out and find my way. It probably took me 6 to 10 months to figure myself out. I truly, I cut my hair. This is after I left SoulCycle. I cut my hair. I literally went to Bali and did a 3-week yoga teacher training. Like I did the things that people do when they go through breakups. But I was okay. And I learned a lot about myself. But yeah, I was really worried about leaving the company. But the amount of space that I created to create something else by leaving the company was worth leaving.
Yeah, majorly. I mean, another big component, even just in talking to friends who I know who have a side hustle, they love their job, but they also love being a photographer, and maybe they're thinking they could turn it into some sort of thing. And this is awkward for people to talk about, but the money thing freaks people out in New York big time. Did you hit a certain point where you felt financially also ready to leave a full-time job? Or were you like, I'm going to take it as it comes. We're going to figure that part out. It's just money.
I love this question, by the way. So thank you.
You're
because
welcome.
I love talking about the finances aspect of it.
A lot of people, let me just say, are like, yeah, just the risk and go. It's like, my rent is $3,000 or whatever. Like this person needs to know, like, I think it's important that we be real about it a little bit,
I came from a graduating class of SoulCycle, where I'd been at the company for 7.5 years. So I was compensated incredibly well.
Yep.
And a part of that 3.5 years where I was still committed to the company, 2 reasons kept me there.
Yep.
The primary reason that I told most people was health insurance. I was worried about losing health insurance.
Yep.
And the second reason was, how the heck else was I going to make as much money as I was making at SoulCycle and be able to live in New York City? Because SoulCycle is what brought me to New York City. The founders of SoulCycle found me back in 2011, and they actually relocated me from LA to New York to be a part of, their original SoulCycle team. So I joined when the company had 5 studios, and I left when there was 90 and 2 international locations. I taught at over 40 of them, sold out classes everywhere, not to toot my own horn, but I really did work really hard.
I think everyone in New York knows you. I think that at least from coming into your room at some point in SoulCycle, I mean,
which is such a fantastic, it shows you what a great platform SoulCycle was for somebody like me who is looking to take the leap.
Yep.
Finances. And even now in my own company, the thing I struggle with the most are finances, because I was never trained how to do that. My background, pre-SoulCycle, I was a waitress. I could count down change from like a 20, but as far as like P&Ls and budgets and, like an Excel, that stuff still overwhelms me. So as far as finances, here's the tip that I often give people who are also looking to take the leap, and leave their job. And first of all, I said, how much money do you need a month to leave? And I don't think people factor that out, and they kind of like get overwhelmed. And then I'm like, okay, easy. So you figured out, it's like how much money, this is how much money you need. So then you multiply it by 12, and that gives you like your annual, right? Or you can do it the reverse direction. If people are looking to leave and they are already making an income from a current side hustle, I say, okay, how much money do you want to make? Let's just say 100 grand is like somebody's goal to make. It's kind of an even number. It makes it easy. If somebody wants to make 100 grand in a year, we divide that by 12. Every month you need to be making $8,333. If you divide that by 4, that is $2,083. That means every week you need to be making $2,083. If you're a photographer and you're charging $100 per shoot, that means that you need to be doing 20 shoots per week. And somebody helped me do that math I realized, I was like, oh, I need to make X amount of dollars to at least be able to pay the bills. I was, it was going to be tough to be able to make what I was making at SoulCycle because I had been there so long. But I figured out the bare minimum what I need to make by doing that simple math. And I was side hustling. While I was working at SoulCycle, I started creating Le Sweat in tandem while working a full-time schedule at SoulCycle. I'm teaching classes by day and I'm working on Le Sweat by night. And that's the hustle that somebody who is creating their brand, you got to love your brand. You got to love your brand.
Like it has to be in your blood. That's why I tell someone, it's like really use it as a side hustle and a workshop space. for a long time. Figure out it has to make you excited at night. You have to be willing to be on the computer at midnight and then wake up at 6 to work on it.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people just want to watch Netflix, and that's totally fine. Keep it as a side hustle. But what you're saying is so valid. Like, you have to love it to turn it into your business.
So I was teaching, Le Sweat was formed at that time. I was teaching Le Sweat classes at various different spots around New York. Finally, I hosted a retreat. I took almost 20 people to the Philippines. Yeah, obviously this was pre-COVID.
Yep.
I took almost 20 people to the Philippines on an epic fitness retreat. And it was from building that retreat that I started to see where I could make more money or at least be comfortable and have more time to work on Le Sweat without having to go to it wasn't 9 to 5, I was teaching a class at 5 or 6 p.m., but you know what I'm saying? Doing my full-time job. So it was that I finally hit that line where I was like, okay, I can go and I can be okay. And I will say I got more jobs being unemployed by SoulCycle than I did while I was employed at SoulCycle.
That's crazy. But obviously the trip sounds pretty monumental because it was, I think what you do really well is you establish connection with people. You have a very vibrant, I think, community of people, but that was a way for you to just really lean in on the community thing and make the personal connection with your brand. A lot of people come on here, and a funny theme that always keeps coming back is just connection and authenticity. If you're starting a personal brand, you're not selling, phone covers. You're the face of your brand. So the connection sounds like it was highly important and did its thing from the jump.
Yes. And a lot of people that are looking to take the leap or looking to kickstart a new brand, I'm just like, well, what are you selling? And do you have a need for it?
Yep.
Because you need to create a need for your product, right? There's got to be people that want what you have. Yep. Otherwise, and that's the fun part of branding. If you have something that people can get, phone covers.
Yep.
What makes your phone cover better than all the other phone covers? And that's what branding is. It's it's coming up with what makes your product. What makes me want to grab yours off the shelf versus this one that's on the left? And at that point with SoulCycle, whenever I was hosting those retreats, I realized that I had a product that people wanted that wasn't at SoulCycle. And I realized that I could sell this product in whatever form it was going to be, not within those 4 walls. And that's whenever I realized, okay, now it's time to go. I can make enough money, and I'm going to push myself to make enough money. Otherwise, I'm not going to make it.
Yep.
So it was kind of, you got to take the leap.
So you took the leap, you started Le Sweat, you workshopped it, it becomes your full-time baby. Talk to me a bit about formulating the brand as it is today. We can get into the name thing, but kind of like the pillars of what that brand was meant to be, how people would access it, naming it, and kind of like how you bundled it at first.
So we're going to go back to the name actually, because that kind of helps the listener understand the journey of Le Sweat, because the journey of Le Sweat has never been black and white for me, which is where I listen to other successful brands and I hear about, they knew what they wanted from point A, it's like, and they chased it. And I'm like, you are, but for me, it was not like that. For me, what it was, I was working at SoulCycle and I was really burnt out from a physical perspective. My hips hurt. I was 27 years old and I didn't want to wake up and walk to class at 27 years old. That's ridiculous. You should have the most energy in the world. And so I started looking at, mind you, my background is in fitness and exercise. I have my bachelor's degree in sports medicine. I have various different training certifications. But at the time that I was working for SoulCycle, I was all in. All I did was SoulCycle. And I think that that's another thing to be successful. You need to be all in.
Yeah.
And which is why I was able to do so well at SoulCycle. So my body's aching, I'm finding different ways, to move my body. And I ultimately landed on, I posted a foam rolling video to my Instagram. And the amount of people that were like, oh my gosh, I wish that you had, can you do a foam rolling tutorial? And I said, oh, okay, there's a need for this. There's a need for this recovery. So Le Sweat actually started as a class called Le Stretch. Le Sweat was like the LLC and Le Stretch was just another trademark that I own, which was a stretching class.
Yep.
So that's how the brand started. But pre that, I had a lot of time at SoulCycle that I needed to put things into. I needed that creative outlet. So I decided I wanted to be like a fitness blogger. I was like, well, I'm going to be a fitness blogger. Turns out I can't write very well. So it's like, maybe I shouldn't be blogging. But you know what? I tried it. And I didn't really want to do fitness, like actual exercise fitness. I wanted to do like the lifestyle. So the clothes, everything.
Yeah.
That didn't work out too well for me. What ended up happening was I just created another exercise class called The Stretch. But before all that, I decided I wanted to start this blog. And the title of it was The Fitness Bitch.
Yes, the fitness bitch.
So my best friend Meredith at the time was helping me. You put that out
there? You literally called it the fitness bitch.
And that's why I'm saying the greatest failure of La Sweat ended up being the best thing ever. So my best friend Meredith at the time worked at Twitter, and she's like a branding genius, worked for, an amazing company. She really helped me figure out those first couple of months, which I needed her. So she was all in for the fitness bitch too. She's like, yeah, look, great. Let's, and so we throw it. It's like, we have it everywhere. It's like, I got this blog. I announce it on social media. We're doing this. And we're like, hey, we should trademark this. And so we like hire this lawyer, which I still use to this day. He's a patent and trademark attorney. Love him. Wade. He goes, it's like the first email. He goes, have you guys done any research? And we're like, no. He goes, you do realize that the Fit Bitch is already trademarked.
Oh my God.
And so here I am, publicly have this brand out.
You've already announced it. You've put it out there.
It was called the FB, and he just is, it's like, this is what he's much older than we are. And he's like, these two
millennial. Yeah. This happened to me too. I actually bookmarked the trademark search portal because every time I name a new one of my products, I've had to reprint packaging because I was just like, but the name is so good. No one has it. And it's fucking taken.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was,
So she was the fitness bitch for a while, for a month. Actually, it was a month. And, it was very, very, it was a hard pill for me to swallow that I needed to change the name. Now, Meredith, who loves Sex and the City, I've probably watched one episode of my life. I'm sorry. I'm not like a Sex
Meredith and I would be friends.
Yes. So she and I, we were out for drinks at a spot, close to where I live now in Nolita / Lower East Side called La Turtle. The same guys that did The Smile and the same guys that currently do a bar called Ray's. Yep. So we're out having drinks with another friend of ours, and I'm, like, oh my gosh, we got to come up with another name. We can't, I was crushed because I was like, that's my brand.
I'm a fitness bitch.
So we're like looking at the menu, and all of the drinks are la, 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 la. And Meredith says at dinner, she's like, what about La Sweat? Like from the Sex and the City episode where I guess Carrie says, I'm sorry, I was being a la bitch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So that was, and at first I was like, no, but then she goes, you know what? You can always change your name later on, but you could definitely put la in front of a lot of things. And I said, okay. Cause
it's like ripe for product extension. It's ripe for you if you wanted to go into different, the kind of like heroic lockup is such a nice mothership to start at.
Mm-hmm. So that was the greatest failure of La Sweat, was the rebrand that brought her to become La Sweat. So now that we figured out the name, she's been La Sweat for, 6-7 years now.
When did the app come into play?
So the first product was the recovery class, which at the time in New York, nobody was really doing it that I knew of. I'm sure people were doing it or doing recovery classes, but because I was at SoulCycle, I had the eye of a lot of large media publications. And side note, I was also modeling with Wilhelmina Model Agency while I was at SoulCycle. So I did have a lot of connections in the media world of New York, which I'm entirely grateful for. And one of the founders of Well and Good, Alexia Brewer, actually took my class, a stretch class. I had no idea who she was. And she was like, I have something I want for you. And it's like when you teach classes in New York, you see, 60 people per hour. So you're just like, yeah. And she ends up emailing me, and I get this email and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a massive opportunity. So here's the second part of La Sweat. Because I have this ability to teach live, as you do live, you're doing on camera live. So it takes a certain type of talent to be able to go live. Because I was teaching live classes at SoulCycle, they were like, hey, we want to put you in front of a video. The first time I shot digital workouts, it was a mess. It's still out there. Like, bless Well and Good for putting me on the air, but it is just like, it's there. But a lot more people from that opportunity that Well and Good gave me, I started teaching digital workouts for, Pop Sugar, Women's Health, Bicycling Mag, Men's Health. And I started to realize, at this whole time, La Sweat was just this, it was just this kind of workout brand. It wasn't really what it was. But then I'm like, oh, wait a second. All of these people are hiring me to teach online workouts. And La Sweat wasn't really, I was still trying to figure out what Le Sweat was. And I was like, well, why wouldn't I just film workouts
You're
under
like, this
Le
is
Sweat?
what people are asking of me. And this is what they're coming to me for. And this kind of entity is ready to be applied to something. It's really genius.
And so, that's whenever you work alone as a solo entrepreneur, it's tough because you don't have a company or you don't have somebody to bounce ideas off of. And I'm sure that if somebody was working with me at the time, they'd be like, hey man, you're making a lot of money from these side hustle digital workouts. Why would you not just turn that into a pillar of your business?
But when you're in it, you can't, it's cloudy. You kind of can't, you kind of need someone from the outside, like these media people to come and kind of curate it for you.
Yeah. And I was very resistant to the idea of doing that initially. And then I found a platform that would allow me to film workouts from my apartment. This was pre-COVID, by the way. I mean, like what people are doing.
What a blessing that your brand took shape the way it took pre this whole thing.
Yeah. So I was underneath another company working with them, and I realized that I didn't want to be a brand underneath a brand if I wanted my brand to grow.
Yep.
And so I found a company that was willing to help me be the front face. It was my brand. And basically that's what Le Sweat became. I launched the actual Le Sweat TV app March 1st, 2020. I was at another fitness retreat in Bali at the time, right as COVID was hitting, which is another idea of like, should we do this? Should we not? I did end up going, but I came back straight into lockdown. But I held off on promoting the app for a month and started teaching classes in March of 2020, had this app just waiting. It was sitting in the app store waiting for people to subscribe. And then in April 1, after teaching a month of online Instagram live workouts, I was like, hey, I actually have a product. If you like working out with me, I would love it if you could support me. And it ended up changing the career of Le Sweat.
What does it look like being the founder, CEO, kind of torch carrier of this brand? But also what I love about watching your journey on social is that I do get to see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. You talk about the app and price changes, or you'll talk about your studio and what is it like kind of building the plane as you're flying it and sharing that with people who are your customers? I
think when you're smaller, for smaller brands, I'm on the bigger side, but for bigger brands, I'm on the smaller side, right? Totally. I'm at this sweet spot, and it's a good spot to be where you can try a lot of different ideas and you're not going to get a lot of backlash from it. And one of the things that I really started to understand from social media is doing Q&As, and just like research. I love your Q&As.
They're so honest.
Yes, I do. And the reason why I do so many of them is because other people love them too.
Yeah.
And that's another way that I create the language of Le Sweat, is that I do a ton of Q&As on social media, which if you want to follow me, my social media handle is at Charlee Atkins. That's 2 E's and Atkins like the diet. Yes. I do a lot of Q&As on social media because I want to help people with the problems that they have. So I always do ask me anything, ask me a question about fitness. And the way that the language of Le Sweat has been created was simply by the language or the way that people were wording things on these Q&As. Yep. And from the Q&As, people want to see the behind the scenes. People are curious about how you create your own brand. They want to see what the filming looks like. And a part of me, I want to see I want to see your podcast setup. I see that you have this, this microphone, and I want to know what you're using because I might need a podcast setup one day. I don't need a podcast setup, by the way, but I'm just saying
it's so true. I learned a lot, even just from equipment side of things. I look at what you're doing. I find so much, I'm not working out as much as I want to, but I learned so much from you in other areas. I think it's really important what you're saying. I share a lot of what I do here. And even this podcast is an example. Not everyone listening wants to quit their job and start a brand at all, but there's so many nuggets and takeaways that I think you're doing it totally the right way by being pretty transparent about building your brand.
And I've always been that way. Full transparency. I want people to understand even the way that I handle customer service. I really try to introduce the elephant in the room.
Yep.
Or, if something goes wrong, if I'm answering a customer service email and it's my bad, I want them to know that it's my bad.
Yep.
Because I feel like people are a lot more forgiving if I say something like, hey, I'm going to be honest, our website was down, our servers crashed, and it wasn't you, like your app wasn't working because our servers were down. It wasn't because your Wi-Fi wasn't working. You know, I really want people to know the why.
Yeah.
And that's like another huge question that I always ask myself anytime that I do anything for La Sweat, or even when when I was training clients before I went strictly digital, I would always ask them, you know, like, why are you doing something? And then they'll give you the answer. You know, it's like, why do you want to work out? People are like, oh, I want to fit into this dress. And it's okay. Well, like, why do you want to fit into the dress?
Right.
And if you just take it to that next level, it really just helps. It becomes a lot more personable. And it really I just feel like taking it to a deeper level just makes everything feel, it makes you feel like you're buying into something that you want to be a part of because you can see everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I very much feel that with your brand. The authenticity, the transparency, and I mean, lest we forget the expertise and the authority. I think that's one thing that, you know, when you rattled off some of your certifications, that's another thing that I would tell people when looking to enter into arena of a side hustle is like, know what the hell you're doing, right? Like whether it's based on your experience in finance or in gardening. I think expertise is where your brand could thrive.
Absolutely. And you hear this word thrown around in every creator. It's niche, find your niche, find your niche. We say it, everybody says it because we have all experienced that is what sells.
Yeah.
Niches sell. And if you are if you know the most about your niche, then people are going to want to buy your product. Right?
100%. By the way, I can't believe we already done 31 minutes. You definitely need your own podcast because I would listen to it and you're so amazing to talk with. What memory do you have in building your brand that lives rent free in your head that just you can't forget?
So I graduated college with the sports medicine degree, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. You know, it's like you leave college and it's like you think you know what you're going to do, but it's like, is this really what I want to do? So what happened was before I was a SoulCycle instructor and before I was the creator of La Sweat, I was a waitress at California Pizza Kitchen and P.F. Chang's and Chili's. Yes, I did all of the corporations. I learned a lot from working for large corporations as far as customer service goes. And it was not a wonderful time in my life. I remember being miserable, but I still wanted to exercise. So I decided to go to this spinning class. This was before so I don't even know if SoulCycle was around at the time because this was right after college. I decided to go to a 5 a.m. spin class. And so here I am waking up at the crack of dawn to go do this indoor cycling class before I am going to go sling pizzas at California Pizza Kitchen. And I remember I clip into this class and it's like the lighting was off. You know, there was just the lighting was off. The bikes were uncomfortable. You know, the 5 a.m. crew was probably not my crew, but I showed up anyway. But I did the workout. The product was great. Like the workout was fantastic. But I walked away from there driving home at 6 a.m. The sun was coming up. I was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico at the time. And I remember thinking, that was awesome, but I could make it better. I could play better music. I would lower the lights. You know, there were so many things that I wanted to do, which fast forward to 2008, 3 or 4 years later, I'm working at SoulCycle in New York City. And so my idea of a brand was never to, be a SoulCycle instructor in New York City. What it was to create an experience from a fitness experience, or to create a fitness experience and to kind of have the touch points that would have made me feel more comfortable in that setting.
Yep.
Come to find out 2 women had already done that in New York City and it was called SoulCycle. So it's like they did the lights were low, the music was better. So it's like I was on the same brainwave apparently. But that was the first time that I remember thinking, I want to touch this and I want to put my touches on it to make it better. And that's probably my earliest memory of wanting to do something that was my own.
That's a builder mentality from the jump right there. It's something that you can't shake. It's a blessing and a curse, us builders, because,
Yes.
2 a.m., like notepad scribble.
Yes.
Doesn't leave you.
It doesn't.
How can everybody find you, your brand, get your app, all the things?
So the easiest way to find me and my brand is to start on social media. Instagram is where I post most of my content at Charlee Atkins. If you want to check out the app, it's in all of the app or in the Google and the Google and the Apple stores under La Sweat TV. And from there, you can pretty much link out to see everything. But lay-sweat.com or at Charlee Atkins.
Charlee, I'm obsessed with getting to talk to you. I'm such a fan. I'm like very honored that you did this podcast, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me be here. And it's wonderful to get to talk to you too, especially since our last passing was in 2020.
We were one of the last, everyone who's on this podcast are one of my last human interactions before the world closed. So I'm just kind of bringing them all back into the circle.
Well, thank you for asking me to be a part of it.
You're welcome. Thanks, Charlee. For more on the show, you can find us on Instagram at Brand Me Podcast or at Preston Konrad. Be sure, of course, to rate, review, and subscribe and share on social. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week.